My name is Valentine Eze, and today we'll be learning callback function. Imagine you have gone to a shop to get something, and then on reaching the shop is locked, right? So you give someone your number, someone who stays around your number, so that whenever the shop is open, then they will call you and then you can come and buy something, right? Okay, the shop opened and the person calls you. That is a callback, right? Callback functions are functions within a function. And what they really do is that when the function has finished its event, a callback function is called. Let's step up a bit. Let's bring it to the web development environment, right? When you want to log into any platform or let's say sign up, a series of verification tends to happen under the hood, right? It actually takes seconds for it to happen, right? But then within those splits of seconds, the developers place you on a callback. So whenever that action is completed, then the callback will happen, and then you are free to use the resources that are within the platform. We are going to be looking at callback. We will head over to our VS Code to look at the callback and then see how we can use callback within different function notation we have in JavaScript programming. Okay, so let's get started. We are going to create a function and then um, give the function a name. This function say name is going to accept one parameter, and then we are going to have brackets, curly brackets. Okay, so basically what this function does is that it's going to say the person's name, right? Um, we are going to call the function, and then that function is going to accept an argument. So whatever name we put here is going to output it on the terminal. That is basically what we want to do. So if I run it on the terminal, you are going to see Valentine. If you look down here, you are going to see Valentine. Whatever name we put in here, you are going to see it there. So you put Musa here and run it on the terminal, you are going to see Musa. Now, this type of function, what we call this function is function declaration. It's a type of part of the group of function notations we have in JavaScript. So this is function declaration. We are going to see the other two functions, which is function expression and then arrow function. Okay, so but then we want to see how callback function really works. But let's create another function that greets. So basically what this function does is to greet us good morning, right? So we are going to create, we are just going to console good morning. Okay, so we let's try and output it here. So if you run this function, we are not going to see this good morning here. But basically what we want to do is that when this function has finished running, after calling our name, then the second function is going to say good morning. So this is where we now have to use the callback function. Callback function will help us to know when this function has completed and then to call subsequent function, right? So inside the name, we'll call the callback. Inside the parameters rather, we enter the callback and then we create the callback function right here. So make sure you have your brackets. So I think that's basically it. So when we run it on the terminal, we should see Musa good morning, right? Okay. Um, that is not all. Callbacks actually can accept arguments as well. So we can also, let's say we want this name, if we're able to want to be able to use this name inside this particular function, we can also do that. So inside this callback, we have assigned an argument, a parameter, and then um, let's say we want to say good morning, then it will call our name. So I'm going to use the template literal. There's difference between the normal quote and then the template literals. Um, so it's going to say good morning and then the dollar sign and then the curly bracket is inside the curly bracket we now call the parameter name. So whatever name is going to is inside here is going to greet them good morning, then the name. So let's run it and see what happens. Okay, name is not defined because we didn't add it as a parameter here, right? So we also have to add it as a parameter here for it to actually work. Okay, so if you run it once more, you are going to see Musa, good morning, Musa. So it's not seeing it because we added it here. Let's try and remove the parameter here so that you see that we are not going to see the name, right? So it's saying Musa, good morning, undefined, because we didn't actually define it in the callback function. So don't forget this. If you want a function to be able to see another function or inherit the properties of another function, then you have to put it in the callback function, right? So it's in the callback function. So this function is able to see it here. So when we now run it, we now see good morning, Musa, right? As we have it here. Okay. Um, we have to look at different function notation and then see how the callback actually works in all of them. There is nothing there. Majorly, what we have to do here is just to refactor the codes, right? Code refactoring is a kind of destructuring the code, changing the syntax of the code, but then the output still remain the same. That's what we call code refactor. Some people call it destructuring. Okay. Most times, why we destructure or refactor code is to make the code smaller or to optimize the code. We have, this is what we have here is function declaration. We want to make expression. Function expression is basically the one we make by declaring variables. So we declare a variable called say name, and then it's going to accept this function, right? So basically, what is here is that we have a function that have a variable, and then that variable can be reused anywhere in our code. So that is when people use um, function expression, they just want to reuse that function in many places in their code. So what they do is that they assign it a variable. So this is what we call function expression. So you can as well do this one here. If you didn't see the one I did earlier, just pay attention to this one. Basically, I want to name it greet, and then I will just remove this greet I have here, and then it's just some refactoring, some change in syntax. So what we have here is function expression, which is different from what we have had earlier. And if we run the code, they are also the same thing. They are just the same thing, right? We also have the arrow function. The arrow function works same way as the traditional um, functions. When I mean traditional function, I mean those other ones that existed before the arrow function. Arrow function came with the ESC syntax, and people use the arrow function in place of other function because of how it works with props and every other thing. There are a lot of things that is garnished in the arrow function. An arrow function is almost the same thing as a function declaration. It's just a little change in syntax. Just remove this function we have here, and then you add an equal sign and then the greater than sign. So the greater than sign, it makes it look like an arrow, right? You can as well do it here. Just delete the function keyword, and then after the parameters, add an equal sign and then an arrow. So we have, and callback works the same way in all of them, right? So if I run it on the terminal, you are still going to see the same thing. So we have seen how callback could access parameters. We have seen how callback works in the different JavaScript function notations. As well. So if you look at my screen again, you are going to see that I have a function that gets user data. We often see this when we are writing our backend. So this is actually a code from an Express JavaScript framework. So basically what it does there is that it declares a function, right? And it accepts a callback as a parameter. And then we set a timer. So the developer wasn't sure of the time that this data is going to be processed. So he set a timeout that after 1000 milliseconds, then I want to get, by that time the user has been gotten, then I want to output that user. So basically what it does there is that it calls the callback function so that the callback function will just listing after the 1000 milliseconds, which is 1 second, then it's going to output the users, right? So this is just how it works in asynchronous operation. Thank you very much for listening to the class, and then don't forget to